Hey everyone, my name is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records, episode 3. This is going to be part 2 of the Black Flag epic. I hope to God it's shorter than the last one, and if it's longer, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. But, I'm drinking black coffee, been staring at the walls, re-listening to albums that I've already heard thousands of times. So away we go. So some house cleaning, is that what YouTube people say? From the last video, I mentioned drummers that played at at the level of Robo, and I completely neglected to mention Earl Hudson from the Bad Brains. I had attempted to put text overlays. If you watch that video, you'll see my absolute failure to achieve that properly. So that was one. Was Black Flag the first to introduce Mansonia? A Vicious Circle, I think, would have been. Throbbing Gristle would have been the first, but Vicious Circle had a song in 78, and then Fang might have predated Black Flag's use of some of that stuff. So Fang I'm not sure about, but Vicious Circle definitely predated them. And what was the yes, because I actually really read up on this then. The story about Ron Reyes attempting to run over David Lee Roth is not apocryphal. It is in fact a true story. And the person who snatched the wheel, who was in the back seat and reached over and snatched the wheel away, was then former Black Flag lead vocalist at that point, vocalist for the Circle Jerks, Keith Morris. So Keith Morris prevented David Lee Roth from potential serious injury. So I think that's everything from the last video that I meant to mention. Where we left off was the TV Party single. Emil was the drummer for a very, very brief amount of time. There's not a ton of footage of him around. But then Black Flag swap out Emil for Mr. Chuck Biscuits. And Chuck Biscuits is one of the greatest drummers in the history of rock and roll. There, I said it. So Chuck Biscuits was overwhelmingly the best thing about DOA. When he was in Black Flag, he just was simply one of the best things about Black Flag. He was in the Circle Jerks for a brief period. I think the only thing he recorded was for a compilation or a soundtrack, and he's playing acoustic guitar. He's not even playing drums on that. But there is some really amazing footage out there on the interwebs of Chuck playing with the Circle Jerks, and was when they got Earl Liberty of Saccharine Trust to be the bass player? I believe so. So that was a ridiculous rhythm section, and if only they had recorded something. Chuck Biscuit's longest sort of stay in a band was when he played on I know the first 3, but maybe the first 4, I'm now forgetting, Danzig albums. So he, I think, had to modify his style for Danzig because I think Glenn and to whatever degree Rick Rubin had a very specific vision for that band. So Chuck in Danzig is amazing because he's amazing, but it's not sort of like Chuck let loose at full speed. So, but if you go and watch any of the DOA footage that he's in, and no disrespect to DOA, but Jesus Christ, it's just like, who is that drummer? My God, who is this guy? So there is Chuck. There's a YouTube channel that. So Greg, was for a long time second only to Prince back when Prince was alive. of the YouTube copyright strikes. So there would be footage of shows that would go up, and you would watch it, and it would be amazing, and then it would come right back down. I guess Greg has stopped caring, so as of right now, there is a channel that I came across kind of in doing the research for these videos, the Full Metal Archivist, and I'm gonna link to that channel. It's exhaustive. It is more than you can handle, and it's not just Black Flag. It's a lot of different bands. And I was actually listening to a really amazing Flipper show last night when I was kind of making mental notes and getting ready for this. So yeah, shout out to the Full Metal Archivist, who is doing phenomenal work. So God bless you. And anyway, there are a number of shows filmed with Chuck Biscuits as the drummer of Black Flag. All of those are absolutely worth watching. It's still the 5-man lineup, so Dez is still on guitar, and Henry is starting to become the Henry that we know. His hair has grown back, started growing the beard, and Black Flag is starting to morph into the band that they're going to become. But I talked a lot about the sub phases in the last video. This 1982 sub phase is maybe the best they were. Maybe they had some amazing eras before that and then after, but Jesus Christ, you really can't go wrong with Black Flag in 1982. They are playing music on some other plane. So the Chuck Biscuits never made an album with Black Flag, which is a terrible shame. However, he did record with them. And in the early 2000s, those recordings finally got leaked. I don't think that these are ever going to be officially released, because Greg takes a very dim view of these recordings. I believe Mark Prindle had asked him point blank about these, and Greg dismissed it as pirated stuff, and that was it. There is a recording that they play in the extras in the American Hardcore movie. I think it's in the extras. I don't think it's in the main film. They find the multi-tracks of Bad Brains and Black Flag playing together, and that was also, I believe, from '82, and that also sounds incredible. Just the little bit that you kind of hear in the background. I think it's Dr. No playing the tape, just saying like, this is amazing, and it is, but you just hear it very, very quickly. That should also come out, for Christ's sake. Anyway, the recordings, the 1982 recordings with Chuck Biscuits did bear fruit on a series of bootlegs. I first got this erroneously titled 1983 Demos. I think I got this in 2000 or 2001. I think that's when I got this. It has Hardcore Archives out of London, scum at ASOL.com. I wonder what would happen if you emailed that. I'm not suggesting that you do, but it's just so funny. Like, you can totally, like, it's all like, I don't know if you can see, like, it's all like pixelated, like, which I feel is the most early 2000s thing ever. This record, the sound of it is, it sounds like a bootleg. Yeah. A couple years later, though, I was at a record store. I believe I was at Record Breakers, I want to say. And they had a CDR of this, correctly titled The Complete 1982 Demos. And it even has Raymond Pettibone artwork, and it also includes an interview and 3 songs from a Radio Tokyo session from '84. So, this, the fandom, if I do think that the fandom might actually agree on this, that this should have been released, this should be released. This is truly the missing link between Damaged and My War. A lot of people have said that, but it is true. This is the incendiary, hot, sizzling sound of Damaged carried into the what would become songs for Slip It In and My War, and in one case Loose Nut. The CD actually sounds much better. It's far more defined. You can hear Chuck Biscuits' incredible drumming, and I don't want to spend too much time on the song by song because we're going to talk about that on sort of the proper albums. However, if you are a fan and you have never heard this, you absolutely positively need to hear this. It's as good as they get in the studio. I imagine the reason that this wasn't released was because of the Unicorn Records issues. So it would be another 2 years before they could release an album under their own name. So I would have to attribute it to that, but I don't know why it didn't come out after. It just, or as a post-mortem release or something. It just doesn't make any sense to me. The hype is real. It's absolutely fucking incredible. Their first two songs, What Can You Believe and Yes I Know, are Dez songs. What Can You Believe is clearly written by Dez. I believe most of these songs became songs for his band DC3 later, but What Can You Believe is clearly not a Black Flag song. Like, it's clearly a Dez song. But Yes I Know, however, absolutely sounds like a Black Flag song, and Henry sings it brilliantly. So, by the way, when I say What Can You Believe is a Dez song, it's a Dez song down to the fact that Dez even does the solo. But Yes I Know really does feel like Black Flag. And I think, if I want to, I might be wrong on this, but I believe that was they used it as a set opener for a while around this time. So then there's a version of Slip It In, which is absolutely incredible. We'll talk about that song when we get to Slip It In. Modern Man, which is a Chuck song, which originally he had done in his band, his pre-Black Flag band, Worm. Modern Man, this version is absolutely incredible, and in a lot of ways I kind of prefer it to what they did on Loose Nut, though I love the Loose Nut version. My War, which is Chuck's major opus, which we will get to when we get to said album in a few minutes. My War, this version, the opening, especially with Dez on guitar, truly sounds like they are throwing open the gates of hell. It is, my God, I feel like if this had been recorded before 1979, Francis Ford Coppola could have used it instead of Ride of the Valkyries and Apocalypse Now. It is Sonic Apocalypse Now. Black Coffee, Beat My Head Against the Wall, amazing. Oh, here comes the cat. I'm not going to try and pick her up. I Can't Decide winds up on My War. And Can't Decide, all these songs are played faster than they are on their studio counterparts by and large. I mean they're not taking it like full hardcore speed. And Love You also winds up on My War. But they have dynamics that they don't have on their studio versions. Also, this could also go under the house cleaning. Chuck Dukowski's bass. Chuck's bass playing on this is incredible, and I actually did think of another bass player who kind of sounds like him, which is funny because I overtly reference the band on in the video, but yeah, there she is. So Lemmy from Motorhead. If you like Lemmy's bass playing, Chuck is right up your alley. But his bass playing here and how he plays off of Greg, and then how he interacts, he's now had more time to interact with Dez. he is phenomenal, and this shows again, especially with his with songwriting contributions. He also wrote "I Love You." He's an amazing songwriter. And Black Flag, at this point, it's interesting how democratic they were as a songwriting outfit and how quickly they became one. Chuck's drumming, Chuck adds all sorts of accents and adds all sorts of dynamics to these songs, especially "I Love You." And and then the whole thing ends with one big long epic run together version of "Nothing Left Inside" and "Scream," which could very well be. You can make an argument that that's the single best thing that they ever recorded. It's that good. It's again incendiary. That's the word, incendiary. And and Chuck also adds a lot of great dynamics. Oh hello, to "Nothing Left Inside" and "Scream." And I feel like that's kind of the template a little bit for what Bill does. We'll get to that on My War. But I mean, I think Chuck does it better. It's more natural to him. So this is an amazing release, and you really need to hear it. And just that sense of everything that existed on Damaged, of the sound of being played forward and backward at the same time, being stuck in the roiling waves of an ocean during a storm. That's what is here. And then Henry is perfect. This is young Henry. The voice is incredibly solid and strong, and he still has the angry, fucked up teenager vibe of Damaged. So, as opposed to when he starts moving into the more invulnerable man-machine thing, which I also love for its own reasons. But at any rate, they never sound like this again, in part because there's not that many drummers like Chuck. He's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime monster of a drummer. And I don't think... I know Dave Grohl has talked about his importance. I don't know that you have a Dale Crover without him. He's... There's only one like him, and this is his epic. So and Dukowski's epic. So they're gone very soon. So listen to this, enjoy it, relish it, and revel in the storm, and go check out some of the live videos from this period, because this is about as good as music gets. So on to the next era. We are now going to get into the My War era. So Chuck Biscuits left at the end of '82, and Chuck Dukowski also left the band. So for Bill Stevenson joined on drums. Technically, this was his second stint as the drummer. Bill Stevenson, legend in his own right, simply for being the drummer in The Descendants and then All. There's a really good documentary about The Descendants. I forget the actual name of it. I think is it Filmage? It's well worth watching. I'll spoil part of the ending. The part where Bill needs surgery and the doctor was in a Black Flag cover band. If that doesn't warm your heart, I don't know what I can say for you. So Bill is an amazing drummer. I think he had to modify his style tremendously to be in Black Flag, and it is a testament to his intensity and greatness as a player that he hung in there. Because clearly when he left again to go do his own thing is not the weird, contorted, naughty insanity of Black Flag. So, so they functioned as a four-piece for a little bit. Greg, in the Joe Carducci book, Enter Naomi, he talks a little bit about Greg's forcing out of Chuck. And Tom Tricali has talked about that as well. And Joe Carducci says that it was one of the most brutal things that he ever witnessed. So the idea of losing Chuck, the idea of losing a band member that important, should have been the end of the band. It is inconceivable that they could lose not just songwriting, not just instrumentally, but again, ethos, vibe, attitude, concepts, ideas, ideals. Chuck is, again, so ridiculously important to this band. So they didn't fill the void immediately. They instead went on about the business of recording their next album. And their next album is this, their second album, My War. Now, Raymond Pettibone, of course, made this album cover. Take a good long look at this album cover, because this is how the music sounds. Stark, strange. What the hell is that? Why that? Why this color blue? How did they make this color blue seem so creepy? Everything about this just seems wrong and weird, and yet completely right, completely correct. Again, this is in its own way like Damaged. Incredibly creative people working at a ridiculously high level. I would have gotten this in very stark back cover. I would have gotten this somewhere along the line. I don't remember. The Run Out Groove message on side A kind of is the best summation you can imagine of this record. Exploring the inside of empty guns. That is kind of how this record sounds. This record sounds like an empty gun. The B-side, Looking for the Markings of Rifled Thoughts. Is that it then? This is produced by Bill Stevenson, who's a very talented engineer in his own right, and has overseen the All and Descendants bodies of work. Greg, but Spot, and according to Henry, at least when he was recording vocals, it was only him and Spot. This is when they started doing the phenomenon of. So this was recorded at Total Access. And this is when they started the business of recording albums in lockout periods. Excuse me. So Henry would record vocals all night, and then Chuck and Bill and Greg would record the next song, and I believe that's how it was done. So this is the CD that I would have gotten. I would have bought this. Again, this would have been very early 93, because I got a CD player for Christmas of 1992. So the very first CD I ever got was Exile on Main Street. This was soon after. This would have been the next thing I got after Damaged, I want to say. And I was completely confounded by this record. This record sounds the only thing I can compare it to is a little bit of like Wheels of Confusion by Black Sabbath. This album sounds like it has a head cold. It sounds wrong. And it sounds wrong in a different way than how Damaged sounds wrong, because technically it is a better sounding record than Damaged, and yet all of it is off. And again, you have to learn how to hear it, and you have to adjust your brain for to hear this music. And it's a world away from the 1982 demos. So that, I think, is probably easier for people to wrap their minds around, because it's like full bore, intense, coming at you, awesome rock music. This is a fucking strange beast of an album. It is a masterpiece. It is now their second masterpiece. If you're talking about albums, if you're talking about EPs, you have to expand that a bit. Have they done anything less than a masterpiece yet? I'm not sure, but in one way or another. But this is an absolutely incredible album. So fortunately, Chuck Dukowski stayed on at SST. He remained the band's booking manager, and they kept his songs. So thank God they did. So the title song is Chuck's. It's a little over 3.5 minutes. It's hard to believe that it's 3.5 minutes, because it feels like it's 7 or 8 minutes. I don't mean that in that I don't mean that it's long or boring. What I mean by that is it feels like it contains a lifetime. And it's a testament to their greatness that they can say that much and summarize that much in 3.5 minutes, or a little over 3.5 minutes. Anyway, My War. So one of the things is, David Briggs said that the first Neil Young solo album was a masterpiece of tones. This is a masterpiece of overlays and spot comping vocal takes together and overlaying guitars. I should also mention Greg's sound again is weird, muffled, odd. It constantly sounds like there's a mattress and several blankets wrapped around the amplifiers. It is a weird, trembling sound, and Chuck Dukowski is gone. They have not replaced the bass player as of yet. So the bass player is also Greg, under the nom de punk of Dale Nixon. So Dale Nixon has sort of become the Alan Smithy of punk rock. So a few people have used Dale Nixon as a nom de plume over the years. Probably the most famous one would be Dave Grohl playing on the Buzz Osborne solo EP in '92. He goes by Dale Nixon on that. But again, that name has popped up again and again over the years. And I think, was it Greg himself actually ran a page on Facebook for a while in the late 2000s as Dale Nixon. I think that, if I'm remembering correctly, it was when all the lawsuit stuff was going on, and he had some really, really kind of out there posts. So at any rate, that Dale Nixon had formed his own version of Black Flag called Black. And he would comment like, "Oh, Dale, you have to stop it with this craziness." Like, that was really weird and funny, and it was one of the last times Greg was funny. So at any rate, so that's Dale Nixon. So My War, Henry's vocals overlap over each other. He sings it. I mean, this is like one of the ultimate fucking rock and roll moments. It's one of the ultimate things ever recorded. It's one of their greatest songs. But a lot of the character traits of the album are present right up front. So even though this is Chuck's song, weird stop-starts, weird kind of lurching stop starts, odd arrangements, guitar solos kind of explode out of nowhere. And then there's the intensity of Henry, but it's all shot through. I mean, the only other record that I can think of that where the mix is that unusual, and it's screwing around with time and space as much, would be Raw, with the original Raw Power. So somewhere between Raw Power, and they always said their primary influences were Stooges and Sabbath. Somewhere between Raw Power and Volume 4 is the sound of this record. And, you know, My War is absolutely tremendous. I think that if you are, you know, if you're something of an outsider, something of a individualistic thinker, I think you've felt like this at some point or another. It's all of the hopefulness and outreach of Rise Above condensed into single-minded, rugged individualism. So it's a masterpiece on a masterpiece. Then we get into Canticide. Canticide is Greg. It's all Greg. And one of the things I will say, and this is like super muffled, and Henry is now trying to sing. He's trying to sing properly, and in Sabbath fashion along with the guitar. But Henry sings flat a lot on this album and the next, but I would contend that he sings flat in the right way. It doesn't matter that he's a shade flat, because it's the right kind of flat, if that makes sense. It has, you know, he has the old phrase, the grain of the voice. So the lyrics are about, and one of the things about the sound of this record is I've always felt like this album is the sound of depression. It's the sound of depression, and it's also the sound of having like a really bad cold. That's what this record sounds like. And to me, Canticide is what it sounds, especially when you're that young, I think. That because it's not cool and it's not romantic. It's awkward and uncomfortable, and you're constantly uncomfortable in your own skin and indecisive. And that's how this sounds, and that is what the content of the song is. The only part that I personally sort of didn't relate to was the I always wear a smile, you know, because anything but a smile would make me have to explain and they wouldn't understand anyway. I personally just scowled. I kind of went the Johnny Rotten route and just scowled all the time. And but I get the sentiment behind attempting to just smile and hide behind that. So I just personally didn't go that route. But it is an amazing song. Weird, lopey-dopey guitar solos. The song is 5.5 minutes. You know, up until this point, you know, a 2.5-minute song was a long song. 5.5 bloody minutes. It's just circular thinking. And that is what happens when you have depression or anxiety or just kind of psychological exhaustion. You just go round and round, and yeah. That is what happens when you have, you know, depression or anxiety or psychological exhaustion. You just go round and round and round and round, and that's what this song does. It perfectly sets up the next song, which is Beat My Head Against a Wall, which is a Greg song and is like kind of on paper this very direct, no sellout statement, but Jesus Christ, the big, weird, chunky riffing, and Henry trying to, again, sing along with that, and he sounds great when he's singing, and then it just sort of stops and goes into this other section, and the stop starting and the weird dynamics and the weird arrangements, that's just now what the band does. And this song is nominally a no sellout rock song on the surface, and then it isn't, because it's just all these strange pieces. And at one point, it explodes out into a frenetic, perfect Greg guitar solo that's like everything, all the insanity that you want out of Greg's sound and his playing. And then it lurches to another stop, and he's duetting with himself on guitar and bass, and something that sounds, I don't even know what it sounds like. It maybe like a jazz fusion theme or something. It's just this weird, and then Henry comes back in screaming. It is so unusual that you cannot take it as a like stay true, no sellout song. You're forced to contemplate what it is they're actually communicating. And are they being sarcastic? Why the fuck are they doing this? What is this about? What are they saying here? So, I think you need the long, loping, circular can't decide to set up this weird, naughty beast. Then we lurch into Chuck's song "I Love You," which is basically it's another amazing song from the man himself. No one can write like this guy. It's basically a short story, a drunken ex jealous, bitter boyfriend who does in a former girlfriend. And to me, there's a long history of that in blues and rock and roll, and I think this is one of the best. I think I put it up right up there with Down by the River or Hey Joe, or I think it's as good as any of those. Henry is acting here and acting and does an amazing job. He sounds completely natural. He sounds like these are his words. Greg is great. Everything works. It's fantastic. And then things, the last two songs on side one are, I would have to imagine Henry on the words, Greg on the music. And we have now gone, beyond punk. We've gone beyond rock and roll itself. Forever Time opens with, I don't even know what that would be. That would be something like on a Pharoah Sanders record. It's not even riffs. It's like it's themes. It really is closer to jazz. Again, frenetic, weird, just bursts. But unlike Spray Paint the Walls or What I See, these are played out now into fully fledged songs. Very stark, minimal lyrics. You don't really, I don't really think you can do much lyrically when you've got music this fucking all over the place and weird and herky-jerky. And I have to say, all credit in the world to Bill Stevenson. He's not a showy drummer like how Chuck Biscuits is. And he doesn't have the sonic identity of Robo, where it's Robo and no one else. But god damn it, Bill's the drummer for a while here, and in a lot of ways, I think between the fact that he could play straight up hardcore and then hang in there with all this crazy stuff, fucking Bill's the definitive drummer of Black Flag. I think I don't know who else could do all of that. And we'll get more into his playing, as we go. Especially once the next bass player joins. So, but, credit to Bill, because my God, somebody had to make rhythmic sense out of all this stuff. And Henry, however, sounds completely natural, because he is just, again, I compared him to a saxophone on the last record. He's like an instrument at this point. He's just an instrument wailing away. And, this and then it goes right into the swinging man setting up the family man of the next record. This is, you know, as unusual as Forever Time is, the swinging man just sounds wrong. It sounds like Beefheart level wrong until your brain figures it out and starts to make some kind of sense out of this. I really struggled with Forever Time and the Swinging Man as a younger person, until one day I was listening to this and I decided that I was going to, you know, I was going to dance to these songs. So the dance that I made up to Forever Time was getting a head start. We had a large basement, and getting a head start and jumping over the couch and allowing myself to fall like I just did. And I'm going to leave that in. And so, like, allowing myself to fall back and on the floor, and then get up and, like, stumble around and then circle back around and take a long running start and leap. And that was the dance that I made up for these two songs. And that was how I learned how to appreciate them. And that's what you have to do with these songs in a way, at least in your mind. You have to allow yourself to be thrown around. And this is, I was actually going to mention this at the beginning, the blasting concept. That's one of, you know, again, in SST world with this group of geniuses. At one point, I think this one was Greg's, the idea of the blasting concept, that they are going to come at you so hard and so constantly that they will wear you down and break you down, and you will be forced to listen to them. You will be forced to contend with them. You will just be exhausted and wrung out. The only kind of stuff I can compare these songs to are like what the MC5 got into by the time they did Poison on the third album. Like, it's a rock song, it's rock music, but at what cost? What the fuck is this? Or everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. What the fuck is that? It's rock music, but not as we know it. It's some weirdo cubist fucking take on rock music. And that's what these are. So we're beyond rock and roll at this point, you know? And who's doing this? Who would think to do this? And again, if they were presenting it in the kind of 1982 demos way or a damaged way, you could maybe appreciate it a little easier because it's like a super hot rock band. But it's not. It's weird and cold and introverted and sort of jabbing you in the shoulder the whole time. Fucking strange business. Exploring the inside of empty guns. That's what they're fucking doing. Then the infamous side 2, and of course they had the t-shirts that just said side 2. People come up to Rollins, you know, he's told that story, that they come up to him and just say, side 2, man, side 2. There are people who don't understand side 2. There are some little twerps out there who talk shit about this, and I don't understand these people. I don't understand how you cannot have an appreciation of side 2. So it's 3 songs, 6 minutes each. So it's like very formalist. They all sort of begin more or less with solitary drum beats. Greg wrote the music for all 3. Henry's got lyric writing credits on the first 2. The last being all Greg, which is probably appropriate. And while I kind of prefer, in a way, the hot fucking rock and roll action of the 1982 demos, this is what I heard first. And these are so much their own animal that I love these. I don't want to suggest that the 1982 versions somehow usurp these, because these are perfect in their own weird, creative way. So Nothing Left Inside, extremely stark lyrics, barely any lyrics. You know, everything just builds. They're all weirdly formalist, and it's amazing and lurching, and Henry empties his, rips it out of his guts as almost no one else can. And then the second song is Three Nights. Three Nights is a very important song in my life. First time I ever heard this song, it seemed like oceanic to me. And what I talked about before of the overlay of guitars and vocals, this is a fucking symphony of that. Henry's whispering and the talking in the background, and the screaming kind of off on the sides. It is so atmospheric. And, I feel like if you've ever been driving at night and you're in a neighborhood you shouldn't be at, and there's like a house with a door open with like a screen door sort of flapping, and there's some heavy shit going on in there, and you may or may not have to go in for whatever reason. That's sort of how this song sounds. It's heavy, intimidating stuff. I think lyrically it's a continuation of what Chuck is doing on I Love You, the sort of drunken psychopath, and this is pure psychodrama. There's the line of "My life is a piece of shit that got caught in my shoe, and I've been driving that stink into the dirt for a long time now." That, I always wondered if that was connected to the story that Henry told about the homeless guy who he was friends with this homeless guy back in DC, and this guy went into I guess he got arrested. He went into a high-class women's salon, and I don't know if he had like a dead pigeon or something. Like he bummed out all these ladies, and the thing that he said was, "I always wanted to be a dancer, but I could never get the shit off my shoes." And so I've always wondered if Henry's sort of referencing that. But this is heavy psychodrama. And the alt-rock band that I was in at the time that I referenced in the first video, I did the impossible. I got them, the band, for a group of guys whose interests in music, Soundgarden was as nuts as they got. And I love Soundgarden, but that was it. Soundgarden was like, wow, this is pretty crazy. And then that was it. So I somehow convinced them to cover this song. And we only performed it 2 or 3 times. But the first time I sang it with everything I had in me, and then I ran off to the back of the basement and just sat on the concrete floor, and I could not catch my breath for 10 minutes. I felt like there had been some sort of psychic purging that I was completely unprepared for. It was like an exorcism, and that's what this stuff is. It's psychodrama, it's exorcisms, it's staring into the center of all the things that you don't even know that are in you, and driving them out and casting out all of the demons. And that's what this is. And it's getting down to the square root of yourself. And then we get into the last song, Scream. Again, super formalist. It's all Greg. Very simple lyrics. It's interesting that Henry is more verbose and just a little bit more character driven, whereas Greg is these are just kind of screw you statements. These are just very brutal, simply phrased statements of self. And the one great thing is, my mom used to tell me, because I'd get a little hard to handle, and my mom would tell me to keep my cool. And there was a lot of cool in the early 90s. It was very affected and very cool. And you know, like I feel like it's summed up by that Simpsons, like, oh, it smacks of effort, man. Like, and I always would think about this song because that line of, I blow my cool all over the place. And I used to think about that, and I would think like, if I am cool, it is my vast amount of uncoolness and my blowing my cool all over the place that gives me any chance at all of being cool, for whatever the hell that's worth. So yeah, this is an incredible masterpiece. Again, this is what would have seen me through. This is what would have seen me through all those nights and all those early mornings. Because I got into a kick where I would play this at like 7 a.m. I got really into making this a morning record. Again, kind of a blasting concept of myself. Again, a wash this out of your life, if you will. So that's it for my war, and we'll be back in a moment. So one thing I should note is when Chuck Dukowski left. So when Chuck Dukowski left Black Flag, he formed the band SWA. He also Worm reformed as well, but SWA is a band I didn't get into for a really long time, and it's only in the last couple of years I've been checking them out and getting more into them. They're awesome. There are a couple SST bands that aren't as famous that are kind of just as good. Like Angst is amazing. So anyway, SWA, but the original version of SWA, their original lineup had fucking Ted Falcone from Flipper as the guitar player. If you can imagine that. There are apparently recordings of rehearsals. So it's Chuck, Ted, and then I forget who the drummer was. Maybe it was Greg Cameron. I don't remember. But Jesus Christ almighty, would I love to hear, because Ted Falcone is one of my favorite guitar players of all time, and what I would not give to hear that, to hear those tapes. So if anybody sees this, if it's ever possible, I'm keenly interested. And at some point I will review Flipper because they're like one of my favorite bands ever. I'm just as, crazy about them as I am Black Flag. So, I figure I should throw that in somewhere. So the other thing I will say is people always talk about Black Flag slowing down and becoming more confrontational. Flipper was a much slower band. It didn't happen in a vacuum. And, one of the early SST bands that's amazing is Saint Vitus. And Saint Vitus, I think, was a very big influence on Black Flag. And I don't know if it was an influence, but the band Trouble, their early records are, I don't know what Black Flag's level of awareness was of Trouble or how much Trouble was aware of Black Flag, but there appears to be some level of crossover between the two. So Trouble is another really, really great band. So who knows, depending on how long I do this for, somewhere down the line, we will get to that. But anyway, we will continue now with, of course, Black Flag and the replacement for Chuck Dukowski. And really, how do you replace someone that important? They just completely avoided the issue when recording My War, but they obviously needed to tour. And so they got Kira Roessler. Kira Roessler was apparently a former or an ex-girlfriend of Henry's. They had been broken up, my understanding is, for a little while. And when he said, join the band, but you're just a band member, we're not anything. Henry sort of goes at her in a different way than let's say how he goes at Bill in Get in the Van. And I didn't know that they had dated until many years later, and I feel like that kind of explains it. It sort of feels like how you would talk about when you're that young, kind of how you would talk about an ex-girlfriend a little bit. You talk about them differently. So I know, he's sort of apologized for how he went at her, but Kira was in this band, the Twisted Roots, before she was in Black Flag. And this is a really, really amazing record. The lineup is, and I think you can kind of tell already. So there's Kira. Who's this guy? That's fucking Pat Smear of The Germs, one of the greatest bands that ever lived. Amazing, amazing guitar player. This is her brother Paul Roessler, who's been in a million bands and done a million things. This is, I always forget her name. Please forgive me. This is Maggie Ehrig, who's the vocalist. And then our drummer here, Emil. Yes, that Emil, the guy who was the drummer for Black Flag for 100 days. There he is, right there. So this is a really, really cool record. It's the most you get to hear Emil play. And there is a song on here called Are There Cobwebs on My Face, which is one of the great freak-out songs of all time. So the Twisted Roots are well worth checking out. The other band that unfortunately is really not documented, and to the best of my knowledge, never formally recorded anything. And that's an unfortunate thing about this period. And again, how these bands had to operate against all odds. The most legendary band who didn't make an album is the Screamers. So all you have is like the Target video footage of the Screamers. And they're like totally forward-thinking, genius band, The Weirdos in their original incarnation didn't... I mean, it doesn't make any sense to think about it this way. The Weirdos didn't release their debut album until 1990, when they put out Condor. Like, what the fuck? So and this is a more recent discovery. I didn't know there was any footage or any recordings of them at all. During the pandemic at some point, I feel like Thurston Moore posted something about them, and that was how I found out that this existed. And that was the band that Kira was in, called Sex Sick. And Sex Sick is like an American version of Lilliput or the early Raincoats. They are, I think they're all female. They are fully formed. They are this amazing post-punk band, like, Jesus Christ. So Kira is just simply the bass player in that. It's not really, I don't think it's her songwriting. It's hard, I don't know. But she's just the bass player in the band, but she's great. She's awesome. But just the band itself, whether Kira was in them or not, just the little bit of footage and the little handful of songs floating around out there, that stuff is up on YouTube. Check out Sex Sick. Fuck, are they great. Like, and, what a weird time the 1980s were that band wasn't jumped on and people said, oh my God, we have to get them in the studio now. So, and unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff like that just kind of fell by the wayside. It's amazing the degree to which that happened. Or the record would just, there's all those bands, Eddie and the Subtitles and the Screws and, and the Dills. Like, it's catch it if you can. And so it's, it does not speak well of the culture at the time that those groups were not seized upon. And that bands had to fight to get records out. So, kind of like how Black Flag did. And kind of like this album, which is very controversial. So, talking about my war, I blew my cool all over the place. Well, now I'm going to blow all my credibility. And to paraphrase the wonderful Abroad in Japan channel, things are about to go from subs to unsubs. Because that's right, I am going to defend the next album, Family Man. You heard it here first. So, yeah, that it's gonna happen. I blow my cool and I blow all my cred. Always will, always have. So I've only, and it has a broken case, I have only ever owned this copy. Again, I just bought these as I could. I felt like there was like a Sam Goody or something that had like a weird run of getting the Black Flag albums in. They just had like one copy each. And I would hit up this Sam Goody and just, Goody got it. Indeed they had. So this is, I should get this on vinyl because this is probably, I don't know what's going on with glare here, but look it up. I mean, come on. This is like one of the greatest album covers of all time. Like, this is a masterpiece of artwork. Raymond Pettibone is a genius. Have I mentioned that? So, like, the story that Kennedy gets killed and this guy takes out his family, except he hasn't fully finished off the daughter yet. So maybe he's just going to leave her. So fucked up, so amazing. Raymond Pettibone is a genius. And I am going to defend this wonky fucking record. The dog that was too ugly to love, right? The hairless cat. So, the thing about me is, and I might as well get this out in the open, right? I have everything Yoko Ono's ever done. So, I'm a huge fan. I love the Flo and Eddie era Zappa and the Mothers. I have all that stuff. I have all those box sets. So, things that maybe some people don't like or some people consider wonky, I really love some of that stuff. And even when I don't love it, I defend its right to exist. So Prince's jazz instrumental MP3 only albums that I downloaded in the 2000s, I defend the right to exist of that stuff. I think things like that should exist, and I think artists should be encouraged to take risks. There's this thing that infects people's minds, and you will see there's a certain twerp on YouTube who that the music has to please them, and they come at it that these rock stars are so pretentious and so high and mighty. Black Flag was playing their guts out to 20 people in North Carolina sometimes who didn't give a shit or who wanted to beat them up. Not every show, but look at the go check out Full Metal Archivist. Check out the size of some of those crowds. And at this point they'd had a while of people play something fast when they slowed down, whatever, or did something that was longer than a minute and a half. So my thing is they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing by making something like this. John and Yoko knew what they were doing when they made unfinished music. There's, I'm sure that John and Yoko were well aware that it was not the follow-up to Lady Madonna, and so, and they're willing to take the hit. They're willing to risk it. And that is what I respect, so, and in some cases, like Neil Young making Trans, people clown on him for decades, and there's all these jackass critics who, it's on worst albums list, and like, what were you thinking? This guy thinks he's, just jag off stuff, and then of course, a few things change here and there, and what do you know? Now it's this neglected work of genius and blah, blah, blah. So, you cannot pay attention to that sort of crap. So I am glad that Family Man is an album that was made. I think it took a lot of guts and a lot of daring and a kind of a smart ass smirk to fucking make this record. And they know damn well it's not going to be loved. There are great liner notes by Harvey Kubernick, who was the guy who organized Rollins's and Dukowski's spoken word performances. And what's the line in here? I want to get it exactly right. Where is it? Here it is. I love this. The winners are anyone who has a Black Flag record or tape and has come to one of their live bookings. I love that. That's just, and the liner notes are really, really, really good. Harvey Kubernick's cool. So anyway, side one, kind of, some of it's sort of field recording stuff. Some of it sounds a little bit more professionally recorded. It's Henry's spoken word. The first piece, The Family Man, which is sort of a sequel of sorts to The Swingin' Man, I think is incredible. There's a great performance of him reading it at some like cable access studio, and his eyes are all wild and he looks fucking manic. It's a really good performance. But Family Man is a great poem. You know, I crucify you with nails from your well-stocked garage is outstanding cultural misanthropy. And it's a really good poem, and it's a really good spoken word piece, and Henry reads it perfectly. Some of the pieces are not that great, and some of the pieces are kind of wonky attempts at kind of post-beat poetry. Some of it is short diary readings, you know, so not all of it works, but I think the things that are on here that are cool, so I think No Deposit, No Return works. Again, Salt on a Slug, it could almost be on Trout Mask Replica. It's a little bit more linear than that, but so, you know, again, artists should be able to make art as they see fit, and the idea of pleasing fans, I don't know that should necessarily be the main consideration. And I suppose as I make more videos, that a theme will emerge. The side one ends with the 9-minute epic Armageddon Man. It's not great. It doesn't really work. I think that the Rollins band later on got really good at this sort of thing, with Henry extemporizing and the band playing. It sounds a little contrived here and there, or it sounds like it's ideas that he's just coming up with on the fly and they decided to leave it. I wonder if they had developed it a little bit more, if that would have been better. I think maybe if Henry had a lot of it feels extemporized, so I think if he was maybe going off of something that was more written, that might have worked better. What the band is doing behind him, though, I think is really interesting and really gets into kind of free music. The other thing I think is interesting about this being a more like experimental release is it's, again, like a lot of their stuff, very naturalistic. They're not doing like crazy tape manipulation, or they're not adding a lot of effects or anything like that. This is all still fairly audio verite, and I think that's another reason I give them so much credit, because it lives and dies on its content. So Armageddon Man, again, parts of it are interesting. It's a little wonky, but I'm willing to deal with wonky. I'm willing to give the artists the benefit of the doubt when things go wonky. And then there's side two. The first piece on side two, I always forget the titles. The first piece on side two is Long Lost Dog of It, which is just kind of like an intro. It doesn't really go anywhere and not much happens. However, the next one, the I Won't Stick Any of You and Listen Until I Can Stick All of You, is awesome. And they played that one live. I love it. Greg is great. And Kira, and I guess I should talk more now a little bit about Kira. So she comes into this band that she has major shoes to fill, and you cannot replace Chuck Dukowski, and she creates her own sonic space, she creates her own sonic identity, and she plays in a completely different way. And because Greg's music was changing so drastically, somehow it works. I think, like, I love Kira. Kira, what should have been the end of the fucking band, Kira saves it. They become a performing entity. They're able to go out and tour hard. They are able to go out and play long sets, and they are able to do it night after night at an incredibly high level. So Kira is, I don't know that you can take anything away from Chuck. And I don't know that I would want to say that, I wouldn't want to say anything against Kira or anything like that. She totally, it's a credit to his vast talent that he left so much of a space, and that it is a credit to her vast talent that she filled that space with something completely different. And she has a fluid, sort of almost like walking bass jazz style, and it's not like super hardcore virtuoso stuff, but it's fluid and loose but tight in a completely different way. And again, she fills the space with something different, and in its own way, it's as impressive as what Chuck does. And Chuck's absence allows Henry to fill a little bit more of the kind of frontman space. So they become a different band. And again, it's a testament to their talent that they are able to withstand the seismic loss of such an incredible member. So, this is kind of a celebration of Kira. As much as it's been a celebration of Chuck, I want to celebrate her too, because she's fucking awesome, and we'll get more into that later. Anyway, there's kind of like side 2 of My War, there's a uniformity to this stuff. A lot of it features kind of the walking bass. There's the introduction of the theme, and then Greg goes off on the solo. I think that I Won't Stick Any of You has probably the best sort of theme. But the Account for What and The Pups Are Dogging It, which are the last 2 pieces, I think are nearly as strong. Again, there's a little bit of sameness or uniformity to it, but still really cool, really interesting. Greg's solos are totally from outer space, and he now really has the ability to stretch out, and he can fill up all sorts of sonic space. And if you like his playing, then this is a gold mine. And there's, you can enjoy all sorts of things about this and hear all sorts of things about it as you go back to it over the years. So this album is much maligned. People, and yes, parts of it are not great. However, get over that and listen to the stuff that coheres, because the good parts of this are wonderful. So I love Family Man. Yes, there, I said it. So on to the next one. All right, we have a second cup of coffee poured. We are ready to go. The next Black Flag album is this one, 1984's Slip It In. And I will get to that in a moment. But first I'm going to get to a couple other things. Around, with this period going forward, the talk is often that Black Flag went from a punk band to a metal band. And people talk about metal all the time. And I think that if you want to, if you consider Sabbath metal and, a lot of hard rock, different hard rock bands from the 70s. I know that Dukowski was a big fan of Rainbow, and I believe Elf. And there's kind of this obsession with that those guys had with a lot of 70s hard rock or proto-metal. But there was also, hair metal and corporate rock. And I think those two things need to be parsed out a little bit. So, the Sabbath, Pink Fairies, Mountain, intense, high energy, hard rock, and then obviously the MC5 and the Stooges, etc. And lest we forget, one of SST's main slogans was, corporate rock still sucks. So when I was a heavy metal kid, and there was a brief period of time where Motley Crue was my favorite band. So I was completely obsessed with Motley Crue. Down to the level of, like, I drew all of their tattoos on my book covers. I would sort of have a strip of each down my book covers. I just would write excerpts of song lyrics. I was completely into, summer of 1990. That was my absolute favorite band, period. So if Motley Crue, and this is the difference, I think, the reason I think that Black Flag was a punk band, and not musically necessarily, but in their thinking, and one of the reasons I was so nuts about making the point in the last video about how intense and what a art movement this is I think that punk functions best. Personally, I think punk functions best when it is an art movement. I think that's when it affects hearts and minds the most. When it starts getting into weird doctrinaire ideologue shit is when it starts to lose people, and when the contradictions become too great to bridge. But Black Flag, the reason I say I consider even this stuff to be punk, and not just a little punk, but extremely punk, is to compare and contrast Motley Crue and Black Flag. They were both in LA at the same time. Also, it's interesting because unlike a lot of heavy metal bands, like Iron Maiden, for instance, who denied that there was ever any punk influence, Nikki Sixx was always like playing that up about them, right? And if Motley Crue had gone into the offices at Elektra in 1984, and they were like, hey, Nikki and Tommy, like, great to see ya. Like, we've got all sorts of ideas about what you guys need to do this year. And they said, great, we've got ideas too. And Tom Zutaut or whoever was like, well, tell us your ideas then, Nikki and Tommy. And if Nikki and Tommy had said, all right, we're going to put out 2 studio albums, with weird like jazz breaks and all sorts of crazy shit going on. We're going to put out a live album. Oh, yeah, and we're going to put out another album, and half of it is going to be Vince doing spoken word poetry, and the other half is going to be me, Nikki, Tommy, and Mick doing jazz instrumentals. That would have been the end of Motley Crue's career. That would have been it. They never would have done that. They never could have been able to do that. And so when I kind of made the jump out of heavy metal world, post Nirvana, that to me, like, Black Flag was like kind of the single biggest part of that, because and that's another reason why I defend the right to exist of Family Man. That's the whole point. Weird moves that don't make a lot of sense, that make artistic, creative sense to the people at the time. Willingness to completely empty the room. That's what was interesting to me. That's what was far cooler to me. And, Motley Crue could never have made those, or any of those bands could never have made those kinds of moves. And that's what I thought was so fucking cool about Black Flag and the Minutemen and all the other stuff that I fell into, is I got really into the weird zigs and zags. And that was also part of the reason why I got into Neil Young and Lou Reed, and and John Lennon made nothing but zigs and zags for a few years. And the more I found out about that, the more I was all in. So that to me was like sort of an inherent part of the whole point of doing any of this. So the whole sort of, anyway, I'll stop there. So that's my spiel on that, and I wanted to get that filmed in here at some point. So this, slip it in, Raymond Pettibone album cover, masterpiece. Raymond Pettibone album cover. Contrast this with My War, because this also sounds like how it looks. This is not cold. This is hot and focused and intense and fueled by black coffee. And so, and again, that twerp who held this album cover. No, he didn't hold the album cover up, because of course he doesn't have it. He fucking streamed it somewhere. That little twerp guy, whose name I won't mention, was like, can you believe how woman-hating this is? If you look at this and you see woman-hating, again, what, like, your brain's broken and your soul, your soul belongs to billionaires, and you are just dancing under their strings. So, all right. So anyway, this record I picked up somewhere along the line. It doesn't even have a dust jacket. It's just loose in here. But it does come with this, an ad for Live 84. And look at these people. I mean, look at them. You look at them and you think, yes, those are people who make music that I want to hear. I need to hear whoever the hell this band is. So what is now becoming a little tradition, the run-out grooves. Side A, only the steaming liquid of caffeine, starker. And then, of course, side B is, and walked out into the bright light without sunglasses. Perfect. And this is the CD that I would have gotten. It would have had to have been early '93, and I was not allowed at the time to listen to music on the stereo. I was in trouble with my parents, and this also has a broken case. Jesus Christ. And so my first girlfriend lent me her Discman, and it was one of those, do you remember those hideous things that were like yellow and pink? It looked like it belonged on the set of Blossom. It was just hideous. And so I listened to this in secret, in quiet, in my bedroom one night. And the night I got it, and was completely blown away by this album. So this is the first, like, sort of quote unquote normal record that Kira plays on, and it is an absolute masterpiece. It's a different masterpiece from the last two, in that it's not as much of a statement of purpose. It's just more of an incredible album purely on its own terms. So, let us get into it. Slip It In, the controversial title song. Again, I'm gonna, I would say controversial to idiots, but fair play. I think that it is kind of hard to parse out what's going on. And Kira herself was, I don't know if upset is too strong of a way of putting it, but there's a lot. She didn't really get what the point of the song was, and was put off by it early on. But I think, and this is where I will diverge for a moment and bring up, because I think it's relevant, where I bring up this band, the Nig Heist, of Snort My Load fame. So this is the reissue from the late 90s. I think Drag City put this out. So the Nig Heist was an opening act for Black Flag, primarily in '84, I think sometimes in '83. It was primarily made up of roadies and the one being Mugger, but Merrill Ward was in the group. It had kind of a free-floating lineup. I think Tricali was in it. I believe Bill Stevenson was their drummer. Rollins would join them sometimes. But anyway, the Nig Heist... So Tom Tricali, when Printle interviewed him in the 2000s, made a fascinating comment, which was, he was talking about, and I've already referenced, the Zappa, Flo and Eddie Mothers iteration, and the Live at the Fillmore record that they made, as Tricali referenced it, the dirty one, and where there's lots of gross, very juvenile sex skits and lots of, and around that time there's from that time is the Playground Psychotics record with weird anthropological surreptitious recordings of the band talking about getting laid or whatever. So he said the idea was to extend that weirdness and to really embody the sexual anarchy and weirdness, and that was what a lot of the Nig Heist was. Also going along with the heavy metal thing, they were parodying heavy metal. So they would go up on stage in these ridiculous hippie wigs and, assless leather chaps and look completely ridiculous and play music that was completely ridiculous. So the Nig Heist becomes the weird id of Black Flag. Though they are the pure, unfiltered id. And you can kind of, if you look at their other opening acts, you can kind of look at the opening acts all as part of Black Flag. So, you have the Meat Puppets who are challenging audiences in their own way. Then you got these guys, and sometimes they were coming out playing naked, swinging their dicks around in front of these dudes with mohawks, and then you have the band, the October Faction, which was called a jam band insofar as they would go on stage with no pre-planned music at all. So they would just totally improvise. So if that is one extreme and the Meat Puppets are another extreme, then the Nig Heist is another extreme, and this is the id. And this, by the way, whoa, there's an insert that keeps almost slipping out. I love this album. I'm going to give it a very high compliment. I might eventually review this on its own. This is as good as the Fugs. It is as wild, and God bless Edwin Canestracci, the best channel on YouTube. It was inevitable before you got a shout out to use a word he likes, gonzo. It doesn't get more gonzo than this. It's the most gonzo shit ever recorded. So eventually I will do a review of this. But the reason I mention them is because I think that their weirdness and their commitment to a bit informs a lot of what Black Flag is doing. Kind of like in a weird way how The Time was kind of the pure sort of funk and party record thing, and then Prince was doing something over the top of that, and sort of the essence of The Time would sometimes filter up into Prince's music. I think the vibe of the Nig Heist kind of filters into the Black Flag ethos. So, and the thing about Kira being weirded out by it, yeah, Kira was weirded out by it, and yeah, assholes have seized upon that and been like, see, but here's the thing, though. Watch Kira when she plays the song. She plays it with everything she has. She's singing along. She's all in. And so the layers of irony and parody and weirdness that Black Flag was willing to kind of throw themselves into and willing to be off-putting on the same level that Zappa was, eventually, Kira is fully committed, and eventually she kicks up her own weirdness, and within a year of this record coming out, or less than that probably, she is now going up on stage. So before that, she was sort of tomboyish or whatever. She's now going up on stage full on dressed up as a Madonna wannabe, with fishnets and fingerless lace gloves, and her hair's all done up, and she's got a ton of makeup on. So, and you can see footage of that. So Kira is in on it too. It's not excluding Kira in the weirdness. And as far as women are concerned, there's women all over this thing in the background. What are they called? The Muffalos, right? And on Slip It In, it is something of a weirdo duet between Henry and Susie Gardner, future of L7. So first thing about Slip It In is it begins with one of the most scalding runs of Greg's guitar ever recorded. I remember hearing that as a young man, and like isolating that moment of like, this is absolute perfection. This is as good as guitar playing gets. This is the top of the mountain. I love this man. I like this is what it can be. This is what breaking the sonic edges sounds like. So first of all, there's that. Then there's the lyrics, and people think it's aimed at women. Men slip it in. So, and one of the later verses is, catting around, I'm not putting it down. It is what it is. So it's not, I don't think it's about women. I think what it's about is, I think it's just about dumb escapism and dumb people pursuing dumb, meaningless fun, maybe. Or it's just making fun of kind of how silly humans really are in terms of what they do for kicks and the lengths that they will go to for kicks. I don't think it's particularly anti-woman, because Rollins, especially when they get into the extended sex sounds part, Rollins sounds utterly ridiculous. He's basically making like, ow, like chimpanzee noises. And then you have Susie Gardner, who turns in the performance of a lifetime, because her faux porno affectations are absolutely spot on perfect. Especially and I can't really mimic it, but here goes. Yeah, it's hilarious and awesome. And it's, again, the layers, it still sounds sort of weirdly sexy, and her sort of little under the breath of like, let's come together, like all of that works. And so it's real and it's not real, and it's silly and it's not silly, and it's perfect. It's a perfect melange of weirdness that doesn't come down with a definitive point of view, because that's not the point. The point is the exploration, and the point is just the throwing it all out there, and you've got to figure out. At any rate, the song is awesome. The sound of this record, spot on the production. The as happens with groups that are very prolific, Black Flag have kind of lapped themselves now. So they are now no longer releasing albums in a linear fashion. They are now, according to both Kira and Henry, they are now functioning in doing lockouts, where they are just locking down the studio, and it's not just doing it to record My War any longer. They are now just recording as much material as possible. So from my understanding, like Family Man and this were recorded kind of concurrently. So, and it was just a big batch of recording sessions. So, that is Slip It In. Now, and that's written by Greg. And of course it's written by Greg, because Greg is all about delving into the weirdness. And that's the point. And weird, again, weird humor, weird parody. And I think that if you have the Zappa, Flo and Eddie Mothers thing as a frame of reference, this will make a lot more sense to you. Also, the Fugs, though I don't know if they were influenced by the Fugs. The Fugs will eventually get their own video because they are one of my all-time favorites. Love them. And then we get, goddamn, we get Black Coffee. Black Coffee is... And so that's the other thing. So you've got all this kind of weirdness and tangled meanings, and then what this record is a lot of it is it's about obsession and obsessiveness. And so you go from layers of weirdness to some very direct statements, and that's what most of the rest of the first side is. So Black Coffee is just a perfectly written, perfectly realized rock and roll song. Like, I've been there. Maybe you have. You know, the drinking black coffee, stare at the walls, and one of my favorite moments, we'll get to it in a second, in Live 84, is the stab to my heart. You know, and watching Tom Tricali in the background singing the backing vocals in the chorus, and just holding his heart, and that's what this song makes you do. It you know, if you feel it, you feel it. And also Greg's, you know, asymmetrical arrangements and weird stop starting are also on display. The other thing is about this song and the next one, they also feel like a verse too long. They kind of go on a little too long, but what I realized why that didn't bother me when I was a teenager is I always thought, well, I'm just going to replay this song anyway. So I was never bothered by the fact that the songs drag just a little too far, but that's okay because, again, obsessiveness. So that's what happens. You repeat yourself. And then there is Wound Up. Now, if there's an assurance, there still is a level of assurance to Black Coffee. Wound Up, lyrics by Henry, is very much far more teen angst. And also interesting, again, it's a little like some of the stuff on My War, where Henry is trying to kind of more conventionally sing a melody. And again, I absolutely love this song, and it's an amazing song, and truly, like, especially being a young person hearing this, I get so wound up right now to feel so let down, and the perpetual rise and crash. I mean, that was, you know, maybe not day-to-day life, but probably like week-to-week life. The manias, when the mania would get yanked out from under you for one reason or another. And the song is clearly about liking a girl and the girl doesn't like you. And, you know, I was there. I mean, I used to, when I was a teenager, I would fall in love with girls in like 10 seconds. I would look at somebody and be like, oh my God, she's the one, she's gonna know. And I would get so like focused on somebody, and then, you know, 3 days later I'm like, oh, she's not that great, or oh, she thinks I'm an idiot, or she's very weirded out by me, and out of respect I'm going the fuck away. So, you know, there was that. I was playing this album for a different ex-girlfriend, and she might in fact be watching. Let's see if she is. Hi, Kristen. How you doing? And I remember she turned to me. Now, she later became a huge Black Flag fan, so I did not realize at the time that I was converting her. But she turned to me during this song, and she just goes. And she was like older and cooler and much smarter. And I'll never forget, she like turned to me and was like, "This is so male," and kind of rolled her eyes. And I you know, it made me think of the Jack Grisham, or I think of the Jack Grisham quote where, like, you know, like, I immediately went on the defensive, and it's not like I'm all about being some tough guy or something, but it was just this, like, you know, like, I'm sorry I wasn't my own semen. Like, I couldn't, you know, this is what I relate to. And we didn't get in an argument or anything, but it was just this funny moment of her, like, being very affected. And and me immediately being defensive about it. But when you love something passionately, you might get defensive about it. But that, by the way, just as a side note, it was all cool though, because pretty soon after she became a big fan and liked this record. But that night she also, I remember, played me a bunch of John Cale stuff I'd never heard before that was awesome. So, you know, we were both learning from each other. So, and then we get into a song that also goes on too long. And lyrics by Henry? Oh, yeah. Rat's Eyes. And I remember in that book of his, Michael Azerrad particularly pointed out this song as being a bad song. I love this song. It's weird. It is weird and creepy and sinister and dark. And that's the other thing about this record is this is not the cold imploded thing of My War. It's dark, and it's like a fire in the distance, and it's creepy. There's a creepy vibe to this whole record. Maybe not as overt as Samhain, but it's in that direction. There's a reason why Richard Kern wanted Rollins to be in his movies. Like, there's a reason why Lydia Lunch went at him, you know, because it's creepy, and this is creepy. And Rat's Eyes, Greg's playing is awesome. It's almost like a really demented version of the Doors. It's almost like the Doors, but really heavy. And I love it, and I love how Rollins sings it. Like, he inhabits the character. And I don't think he's self-consciously doing that. I think he was so ramped up and so in his own mania that I think he just was living it. But you know, that's part of what's so amazing about it. Full commitment. So I love Rat's Eyes. I also just on a side note, I love the use of the word sullen. He whips out sullen, and god damn it, you know? So people who dog Henry, like that's an example of like perfect word choice. Sullen, exactly right. So the thing about this record is it has the live band dynamics that were largely missing from My War, but there is still a certain amount of production happening that carries over from My War in terms of like the weird muted things happening in the background and filling up the stereo picture with kind of shadows and fog. And I think Rat's Eyes is like a perfect example of that. And also, even the weird sex buildup on the title track. So anyway, flip the record over. Speaking of shadows and fog, we have a 6-minute instrumental by Greg, or a nearly 6-minute instrumental by Greg, called Obliteration. And it's a perfect continuation. Like, if you were listening to this on CD or streaming, it's a perfect continuation from Rat's Eyes. It's like the development of Rat's Eyes. And it begins with, I guess it's a cymbal. It could be a gong. It's awesome. And it's so atmospheric and so, it's almost lurching, but not, you know, it's someone walking behind you, hiding in the shadows, ducking behind a building, you know. It's creepy and weird. But in a very, very captivating way. And also, I have to say, the solo that Greg lets loose with at about the 4-minute mark totally could be Albert Ayler. Like, when people talk about this stuff with jazz, like, yeah, jazz. Also interesting that this completely fits the character of the album and would have stuck out, even though I said that there was a sameness to Family Man, this would make no sense on Family Man. So it's also interesting that the instrumental makes sense on in the sequencing of the album and in the overall feel of the album. And then we come to a co-write between Dukowski and Rollins, and that is The Bars. The Bars could very well be my single favorite Black Flag song ever. It is an absolutely stunning rock and roll song. It doesn't have as much of the weird asymmetrical stop-starts and all of the different sections that Greg puts in, but yet Greg plays it perfectly. And it kind of reminds me of when, like, the Melvins do a cover, and you realize that the Melvins actually could play, like, straight rock if they wanted to. And you realize, like, no, like, all their weird rhythmic stuff and all their weird tempo shifting, that really is a stylistic choice and an aesthetic choice. So and Greg proves that here. Like, he plays far more straightforward, but so effectively and so passionately and brilliantly. The lyrics, which I don't know who wrote what out of this, but whoever wrote the lyrics are absolutely incredible. And the my mind hates my body and my body hates my soul. I close my eyes and fight inside my own black hole. Every time I see I've got my hands wrapped around the bars and I want out right now is again, that is perfectly realized. That is absolutely brilliant. And, that is... When I started seeing my first therapist, I actually just put that on a cassette and brought it to her at an early session and just said, look, between this week and next week, listen to this. And I'll never forget, like, the next week, she, like, hands me the tape back, and she was, like, a very nice middle of the road woman, and I don't think I was the easiest, like, patient or client for her. I think I confounded her all the time. And I'll never forget her just, like, handing it back, and I'm like, so, do you get it now? And she was just like, there's so much anger and depression. And I was like, yeah, that's right. Now you're starting to see. But this song is and the echo effect on Rollins's voice. Again, these little touches that I'm assuming Spot puts in. Brilliant, beautiful. Because again, this is just the band playing their asses off, right? And so all those little tweaks, the little enhancements that come in. Spot is the man and knows what he's doing. And it's just an absolutely phenomenal song. I don't know what else to say. And God bless Chuck for being such a gracious, wonderful human being to make contributions to the band after he'd been, like, yanked out of them. It says a lot about his character and his willingness and his creativity. And then we have My Ghetto, which has been considered by some a proto-power violence song. I have heard some power violence, and I have to say it doesn't do much for me. And part of the reason why is because it has no dynamics and it has no human contours. This does, and that makes it all the more believable. It's the difference to me between oral CGI and, like, in-camera effects, let's say. This is real. These are people playing in the studio. Like, this is how they sound. They have to make themselves sound like that. So I like to think in my perfect rock and roll fantasy world, somewhere in Japan, this record was heard by a young Yamatsuka Ai, and somewhere in Osaka, and he was like, challenge accepted, and thus he was probably already, I think he might have been already doing Hannah Teresh by that point, but in my mind, the Boredoms were born partially out of this song. I have no way of knowing if that's true or not, but like I said, I like to think that it is. It begins with about 25 seconds of feedback, and not even like cool, imposing feedback, but like irritating, bad amp feedback, like a malfunctioning chord feedback, right? And then it just, it's like this weird level beyond spray paint or something like that. Like, to say it's a contorted spasm doesn't even begin. It's so fast and so manic that it just becomes like arrhythmic, and it just sounds like everything has already exploded on itself. And Rollins does an amazing job, I assume, based on the live '84 performance. I assume the lyrics are improvised. It's an amazing, totally deranged, totally insane song. But again, played in such a way that you can hear it as parody of hardcore. Again, you can take it on different levels. And you can be, and you can take it like, well, is this, are they clowning on all of their imitators? And I remember in Get in the Van, Rollins talks about, like, on the tour for this record, there was a band opening for them, I think in Mexico, who had Black Flag's stage set up. Like, they had, the guitar player had the plexiglass Dan Armstrong guitar, they had the plexiglass drum kit set up like Robo, and as Rollins said, all of their songs sound like Thirsty and Miserable. So, not that the song is about that, but specifically, but in general, it could be, because again, with Black Flag, you just don't know, and you have to sift through the layers. And speaking of layers, we come to the final song, the epic, the 7-minute epic written by Greg, You're Not Evil. I have never really known what to make of this song, other than I feel like it is also, again, atmosphere, creepy, bizarre. What is this? What kind of weird fucking horror movie thing is this? Gory, strange, atmospheric, and Chuck Dukowski is actually one of the people in the background screaming. It's very weird stuff. The only thing that I've been able to make out of this song is that it is somehow related. Again, like it's a cousin of Slip It In. So Slip It In begins with this long, weird thing about sex and about, idiots being idiots. And this is like, I think this might be about, like, addressing like a metal kid, or addressing like the satanic panic, and they are going to make something that is, without being overtly satanic or something, they are going to make something more evil and imposing sounding than the metal bands are, and that somehow it's like a send up of the moral majority. Like, that's the only way. And I don't, Greg said something that the politics of the band was in the sound of the records, not on the surface level. And that's the only way that I can understand this, is that this was somehow like their response to like the Christian right moral majority thing, thinking that Ozzy was going to destroy the youth of America. That's all that I can come up with. It's odd. It's, your guess is as good as mine. If you have any thoughts on this, about what you think the song is, please let me know, because is it, I don't think it's as simple as a heavy metal parody, and the lyrics kind of contradict themselves all over the place. I've never been able to work out if it's supposed to be shifting perspective, like different scenes in a movie. I don't understand this thing, but it's a captivating, weirdo, like, what the fuck way of ending a record about obsessiveness. So it ends with, like, I guess religious obsessiveness or spiritual rot obsessiveness. So this whole record is just a dark, heaving, sweaty, weird thing that you have to work out. You know, it's kind of like Fire Walk with Me or something. There's kind of a, what the hell was that? What's with the ring? What? Except this one doesn't have an angel at the end. It just ends with fucking "You're not evil." So there's you don't even get the angel at the end. So that's Slip It In. It's amazing. It's amazing. You know, go listen to it. You know, I want to know what you think about this damn thing. As sort of a postscript. So Black Flag went on tour for My War and Slip It In, and My War had come out first, of course, and I always thought My War was a 1983 release, but it in fact was 1984. So there are, Black Flag put out a live album, Live 84. I have a copy of it somewhere. I was not able to locate it. But there is this, which is live in England, and this has been repackaged. It's also been repackaged as Live 84. So, like, this is on Amazon, and I forget where else I've seen this pop up. They've repackaged this one and not using this repurposed My War cover. I've seen it pop up in a lot of different places over the years. So you can see the show. It's not the whole show, but it's very, 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 very good. So this is Kira, Bill Stevenson, Rollins, and Greg. But Live 84 also came out as a live video, and this is my version of it. I would have gotten this in the very early 2000s. So this was, what, August 26th? Yeah. So this was August 26th in LA. Is that right? I want to say it's... wrong. At the Stone in San Francisco. And this is... There's only one older song. It opens with a jam on The Process of Weeding Out, which they stretch out to 8.5 minutes. What's the other? They play I Won't Stick Any of You. Is that the one? Yeah, Rollins plays, bangs a cymbal on that. The rest of this, Nervous Breakdown and Jealous Again. The rest of it, though, is basically all My War and Slip It In songs. They do Three Nights and Nothing Left Inside. They do a version of My Ghetto that has totally different lyrics, which leads me to believe that what he did in the studio was improvised, because these are clearly improvised. They're just as cool, what you can make out, because it's so furious and intense. It's a 2 or 3 camera shoot. Like it's pro shot. Like this is not some bunk ass punk thing. Like money was spent on this, and the band is at the height of their abilities. Rollins, in Get in the Van, weirdly said about this show that Bill played too conservative. Bill is, I don't know what he means, because Bill is all over the place in a good way. Bill is not powerful and propulsive here. Bill is like, again, it's like a jazz drummer, or almost more like a percussionist. Like he's sort of all over the kit, and sort of one part punk rock drummer, one part Bill Ward, one part like avant-garde percussionist. Bill Stevenson's performance is fascinating on this, and anything but conservative. And then you have Kira. Kira, as a physical presence, is as all in her way as Chuck is. She plays her ass off. Kira's a fucking hero, man. Kira, like, fucking all four of them live in this way, night after night, bar after bar, venue after venue, the shit that they had to put up with, playing their fucking guts out. And again, like, it's just one thing, because this is a multi-camera shoot, but goddamn, like, look at some of the concerts that pop up from this tour. There's one at Maxwell's, there's, like, God, Jesus, there's like, you know, there's 50 people there, and these guys are playing with everything they have every single time. There's a story that early in the band's life, they were playing somewhere on the East Coast, and there were like 10 people there, and Rollins was kind of fucking around, and Dukowski took him out back and fucking straightened them out and was like, these are still people who paid. It's not their fault that there's only 10 of them. You give them everything you have. And Rollins, being Rollins, was like, you know, yes, sir. And the commitment is here. I am going to say, given the sustained intensity of this performance, the level of songwriting, the level of musicianship. I didn't even mention what Greg is. I mean, for fuck's sake, what Greg is doing is, if you love what he does, this is everything that you could love. This is Greg to the nth degree of intensity. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is my favorite rock and roll performance that I've ever seen filmed or recorded. I like this even better than Live at Leeds. I have gone back to this thing. This is truly, this is like vitamins. Like, this is what you need to get through life. I absolutely adore this thing. It is in me, and the whole thing is up on YouTube, so you can watch it unexpurgated. Though I will say, whoever the cat is who posted it is monetizing the hell out of it. You get ad breaks every 5 or 6 minutes, and all I can say is, you know, sir or madam, if you happen to ever see this, I hope you're donating some of this money to Spot and some of the SST people who could use it, who have never gotten a check. Just saying, because the amount of ad breaks in that goddamn thing, he's probably bought 4 houses off of it. So, just saying, like, you know, do. I hope you're doing what's right. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. This is, and the version of Rat's Eyes, Jesus. The Scream and, not Scream, the 3 Nights and Nothing Left Inside, all of it, all the weird, Forever Time is on here. Oh, they also do Fix Me, Jesus. Black Coffee, like, everything's played a little faster, a little tighter, and a little hotter than on the studio albums. You know, Rollins is an absolute fascinating physical presence. He sings his ass off. He gives every atom of himself to you, and it's like, you know, for in these years, he truly is the part of a continuum from, you know, James Brown to Iggy Pop to him. Like, he is a physical performer par excellence. He is the thing. He's the living being. You know, he's the living, breathing, fucking avatar of rock and roll at this point. So I can't think, you know, there are other great frontmen during this period, but what Henry is doing, you know, the only other people in 1984, the only other people who I think are anywhere near what he was doing, like as far as people who were out on tour, would be HR from the Bad Brains, and all the way on the other extreme end would be David Lee Roth. And that's sort of it. Like, what the hell is this? It's unbelievable. It's amazing. Check it out. So, I think that is where we are going to call this video. I don't want it to be too long. I have plenty to say about the next few records. So, I think we're going to make this a 3-parter. Pretty wild. So, you know, thank you for hanging in there. I've got a few more subscribers very cool. Thank you, and thank you for watching. And you know, I may very well just go straight into filming the next segment. But yeah, we will see you next time. Bye.